Out, you're going to see on the headline, America at imminent risk of nuclear Armageddon. But that should be the headline of every newspaper. That should be the lead story of every newscast. Not because the goal is to frighten people. I've had many people accuse me of fear-mongering, saying that it's irresponsible what you're doing, promoting fear. I say it's irresponsible for the American public, for the American citizen, to allow the government that works for them to engage in policies that will lead to the termination of all human life on the planet Earth as we know it. And that's the end result here. We're talking about a number of things. Today we can talk about
their minds around.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, how does this work now going forward?
Then you have Putin, who just landed in North Korea a bit ago. Gary was showing some of that scene a second ago.
Yeah.
And so you see it's very, very, a strong showing. It's actually resulting in something. They're getting millions of rounds of ammunition, rockets, all kinds of things. Prior to this, you had the Putin Xi Jinping meeting, which also has diplomatic consequences and production from the Russian side. So you see the world is starting to see every time the Russians get out there, they're doing something, they're accomplishing something. And when we get out there, we have these complete mixed messages. You have us embarrassing ourselves on the national stage, and we don't seem to even know where we're going. These things are going to have consequences even beyond the outcome of this war.
Right. Yeah. Well, we tried to isolate Russia. And in fact, it's now counterintuitive. We did the exact opposite. By our efforts to punish Russia with economic sanctions, to cut them off from SWIFT, to try to make them an international pariah, we've now made Russia stronger than it's ever been in the last 50 years. I would argue Russia is out now at the top of its economic game, and it's economic and it's diplomatic. They're not wielding influence around the world because they're out with armies invading countries. In fact, one of the things that's happening in North Korea, it's the Western analysts get it all wrong. They say, "Oh, Russia's desperate for North Korea weapons." Oh, that's nonsense. What's going on though? Russia's given North Korea an active live laboratory where they can test their weapons to see how they work in an actual combat environment. And so Ukraine, the North Koreans have got their technical personnel. They're embedded with the Russians as they fire ballistic missiles and other missile systems, tracking how they operate and seeing how are they as accurate as they were engineered, designed to be. That's number one. Number two, Putin's going to make good on his threat that if the West starts hitting inside Russia, North Korea is going to have everything it needs from Russia. Russia's got technically superior weapon systems than North Korea. North Korea's got a lot of quantity, but Russia's got a lot of quality. So, this game that's being played from a diplomatic standpoint, where the global South is following up, and like I said, just compare and contrast. At the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, 136 countries, and that is not an exaggeration. Compare that with what they got at Birkenstock. I couldn't believe they have a city in Switzerland named after those clunky shoes. But
let me ask you in the remaining time we have here, from a tactical perspective. Now Russia has not moved very fast, and
yeah.
Even though they're moving methodical, it still is taking a long time. And even though they made some pretty good progress a month or two ago, even that has kind of slowed down. The arrival of these additional ammunition is also making it more difficult on the Russians. But if what you and I are saying is accurate, that the Ukraine side doesn't have the manpower to ever reverse the course, then at some point it's got to go down. Do you see this as I think I saw, who was that? Somebody that you and I both know, Larry Wilkerson actually said he thinks that potentially within 60 days there could be a major break in the Ukrainian front lines. I haven't had a chance to follow up to find out why he thought that. But what is your sense for, can this go another 60 days in a break, or can it even go another year? Can the Ukraine side keep on causing inch by inch for the Russians forward, but not to break? How do you see it playing out?
Yeah, I don't see how it would go another year, because what Russia is doing is, yeah, they're moving slowly and methodically. But the reason for that is, one, they're trying to minimize casualties, but two, they're forcing Ukraine into having to bring forces to the front. And as they bring them along their lines of communication, the Russians are hitting and attacking them and destroying them in many cases. Plus, they've now stretched the line in a way that it was always this, 1,000-kilometer long line, but Russia was not attacking at the same time all along the line a year ago like they are now. They are doing that now because both they have the manpower and the reserves in place to do it, as well as the supplies. So it is like that situation, if you think back to your kids' birthday parties, if you're blowing a balloon up and you keep blowing, you're going to reach a point where that balloon pops because you have stretched it beyond its capability to retain what it has, the air inside. And that's what I think the Russians are doing to the Ukrainians. They're forcing them to stretch their capabilities and degrading them in the process, degrading NATO militarily in the process, because NATO keeps pouring in this equipment that it can't replace. It would be one thing if they had the factories up and running throughout the United States and in Germany and in England that were cranking out this new materiel, vehicles and tanks and artillery and howitzers, but they're not. They just simply don't have that capability. They're looking at it. They're years away from being able to do that. So from Russia's standpoint, everything you can do to force them to expand their arsenal against you and take it out and weaken it is less that you're going to have to worry about down the line.
And do you see any prospect or any signs at all that Russia could have a hard time at some point that the trough of recruits that have been coming in above what they have been losing in combat could slow down? Do you see any possibility of that?
Not at this juncture, in part because the elevated rhetoric from the West, which is so belligerent and talking about attacking and destroying Russia, it's building support for Putin. It's building support for the military effort. It's not debilitating them. In Ukraine than Joe Biden is in the United States. So, take a look at that. He's got like 56% support, and Biden's down to 34%. So, maybe Zelensky would be better off coming to the United States and running for president. He would, he might surge as a front runner, but his credibility. The Russians are pushing the legal issue that his term expired. He has illegally suspended the elections. He's used the war as an excuse, and they're losing on the battlefield. Zelensky may also have done this to try to buy himself some insurance against his own domestic opponents within the military, because they're increasingly unhappy with him. But the Ukrainians are faced with this. They failed to take the best deal that was offered them, and now they're getting a worse deal. If they don't take this worse deal, it's going to get, even more bad. It's going to be untenable. They'll be faced with unconditional surrender. Because if you think back in March of 2022, they had a chance that Russia was offering, okay, we'll pull our troops out. You'll retain control of Luhansk and Donetsk. They'll get some independence where their rights will be protected, but, we'll pull out. Well, that was 2 years ago, and, they said, oh, no, we're not going to do that. Okay. Now, here's Russia saying, all right, we're going to keep Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia, and you pull your troops out. Russia didn't say anything about pulling its troops out, and you don't join NATO. Well, that was immediately rejected. How dare Russia offer something like that? How can it do that? What's its on what position does it have? Well, the fact is it occupies those areas right now and are steadily killing the Ukrainians and pushing them back. And the next stage will be what they did, what the Russians left out. They didn't say a thing about Odessa. They didn't say a thing about Kiev. Kiev is a Russian city. The West better not ever forget that, no matter how many times they want to proclaim it as some sort of, sacred Ukrainian symbol. It's not. It was the birthplace of Christianity in Russia more than 1,000 years ago. There wasn't a Ukraine back then. Ukraine is a